Grenada +20. A daring raid becomes a desperate battle. A Delta Force commando looks back. Inside an invasion, what happened 20 years ago today as U.S. Special Forces were approaching a new enemy. I'll speak live with the Delta Force commander who was there. Welcome back. 20 years ago tomorrow, as the United States was reeling from a terror attack in Lebanon, the U.S. military launched a combined forces invasion of Grenada. For some of America's most elite troops, that confrontation in the Caribbean led to some desperate hours.
I'll tell you what.
October 25th, 1983. A small island north of Venezuela becomes a major battlefield in the Cold War. Just 2 days earlier, hundreds of U.S. Marines had been killed by a suicide bomber in Beirut. President Ronald Reagan and his advisors in no mood to back down from confrontation. In Grenada, they get it. A Marxist regime on the island has been overthrown by an even more menacing group of military officers. The new leadership, allied with communist Cuba, is a serious threat in the eyes of American policymakers. The military objective: prevent that regime from gaining a foothold and rescue hundreds of American medical students on Grenada. One mission, captured on grainy amateur home video from a resident's back deck, goes poorly. Delta Force troops in a small cordon of helicopters approach a forested ridge to assault a prison and free some political detainees. Cuban and Grenadian troops see them coming, blast away, and hit a BlackHawk. We can barely make out the BlackHawk going down, the fuselage hitting the water. The pilot is killed. More than a dozen men are wounded. The other American helicopters scatter. Later, the Americans left behind get help.
They already checked. I don't know what he's doing back there. You know they got a rocket launcher on that hill.
Their comrades who dispersed return. You can't see them dropping from their chopper with no ropes, but you hear a narration.
Men are going down.
Reinforced, Delta commandos hold off the Cubans and Grenadians, secure the beach, and get their wounded out. Offshore, aboard the USS Guam, the Delta Force Assault Troop Commander, Captain Jeff Beatty, has head and knee injuries, but lives to tell the tale. He survived that desperate battle, and today Jeffrey Beatty is joining us live from Tucson, Arizona. The Delta Force Assault Troop Commander went on to work with the FBI and the CIA, and he now heads Total Security.us, a firm active in anti-terrorism consulting. Jeffrey Beatty, take us back inside that Delta Force mission. Tell us about what happened behind enemy lines.
Well, it was interesting, Wolf, and very few people are aware of the fact that this was actually the first BlackHawk down. And as your piece accurately captured, it was an awful bad morning. And when that first helicopter went down, the people that videoed it, they all had the impression that no one could have survived that. The other helicopter departed the area because it too had wounded on board. It was pretty badly shot up, and they left regretfully, thinking that 16 of their comrades had perished in that crash. As we found out, as we were able to make communication with them later, I've got to tell you, I was absolutely moved at how that remainder of the Delta contingent responded to come back in and get us out.
A lot of people go back to Grenada. I remember covering it to suggest the planning going into the assault was not very good.
Well, I got to tell you, Wolf, you know, we did that whole plan over a weekend. And it was all about rescuing the American medical students. You have to remember the times, as I'm sure you do. President Reagan was certainly not going to put himself in a position that President Carter had been in, involving American hostages. And these 1,000 American medical students were being held on a shoot-on-site curfew. You know, nobody could leave the campus. We tried to get them out peacefully. We even told the Grenadians we were coming and didn't intend to fire upon them if they would just let us get our people out. So, as you said, even in the wake of Beirut, the president was not going to stand by and let 1,000 Americans be held against their will, and so in we went.
Did you think you'd survive that battle?
At the beginning, I didn't think that things looked all that well. The crash was pretty severe. We had 16 wounded. I've got to comment on the heroism of the folks that were in that aircraft. We had about 2 able-bodied people who established a blocking force. The rest of the group helped each other tend to their wounds. And then finally, as you could hear on the narration, we established with a survival radio contact with the remnants of Delta, who came back in and literally, Wolf, stepped out into thin air and fell 30 to 43 feet, allowing the trees to break their fall. No ropes, no rappelling ropes, no nothing. Picked themselves up, helped us evacuate the wounded, put in a good blocking position, and that was the start of our day.
You were a young U.S. Army captain. There was a young major there with you as well who's very much in the news today, a lieutenant general in the U.S. Army, Lieutenant General Boykin, who's made some controversial comments about Muslims. What do you remember about his role 20 years ago today?
20 years ago, Jerry Boykin was a tireless planner. He was an excellent operations officer for Delta. And what I hope Americans understand is that Boykin rode in on that mission and to help come to the aid of his countrymen. And for his troubles that day, he took a .51 caliber Russian anti-aircraft round through his shoulder, fired by Cuban or Grenadian gunners. That's Jerry Boykin.
All right, Jeffrey Beatty, good to spend some time with you. Always good to get your insight. Thanks very much reflecting 20 years ago. A lot of people have forgotten about Grenada. You obviously have not.